attracting birds, bees, and butterflies, and even others into your garden. So that's the topic of our presentation today, and I have to get myself going with this slide. Here we go. So, oh, that didn't go. Let's see if it'll go again. There we go. So we are a part of Extension. There's 4 different parts of Extension. The Master Gardeners are in the Agricultural and Natural Resources area. If you go to the Lake County Fair, which just finished, I believe, we have a building there that we have a garden, a community garden there, where we want people to go to that garden and say, hey, look at that plant, and this is a good idea what to plant. And that garden has morphed since the 20 years I've been there, because they put a new building up last year, 2 years ago, and their garden got disturbed. So we kind of had to start over again. But this is the Ohio line, and it's always a good idea. If you have any questions, I always tell people to go to any sites that are edu.org or but don't do the .com, because usually they're commercial sites. They're trying to sell you something. So any of the like arboretums, the education facilities like us, we're part of Ohio State. This is our address in downtown Painesville, and our phone number. And we do have what we call, oops, where did we go here? Oops, now we went back. Okay, we have our hotline, which is Tuesdays only between 9 and 11. You can call and talk to a person if you have any problems at all with it, bugs or diseases, questions about planting, or how fall's looking, whatever you want to talk about. There's usually somebody there between those hours. And if they don't have an answer for you, they will be glad to get you one and give you a call back, or take your name and address and send you something through the mail. So it's a good one, because sometimes it's just nice to have that person to ask. There's a lot of things that I know. I answer questions through Columbus for the state, and sometimes I'm just online. So sometimes you don't have an interaction with the customers. They have a question. If they don't put a photo, I don't always really know what they're talking about. So this is a better way to go. So today's program is it's about birds, bees, and butterflies, and hopefully it will give us a bit of information on why it's important to attract these creatures into our spaces to enjoy, and for the benefits that they provide. They are beautiful to look at and fun to watch, but they are vitally important, because 1 out of every 3 bites of food we eat depends on a pollinator. So why attract these creatures to our yards? Well, they are in trouble. Pollinators are somewhat in trouble. There have been, colony collapse diseases with the beehives. There have been, the monarch was on the endangered list. She's back to the vulnerableness. Now it's changed. Watchdogs kind of keep track of this stuff, but they are ambassadors of nature in many ways, and yet they are very important to the pollination of our plants and our vegetables, and the beauty that they provide. So over the last 10 years, the U.S. has lost over 50% of their managed honeybees. As the honeybees go, as the insects go, so go the birds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very important to provide some spaces for these creatures. Here I did. I last saw a monarch last year on October 12th, that late. As we go further down the presentation, I know I had the hummingbirds too when I last saw them, or when I first saw them. So let's see what happens to them this year. As long as there's a food source for them to come, they're going to stick around until they fly. Then I was a little worried, like, are you going to make it? Are you going to make it all the way down there? Because they have a long distance to go. But it's kind of interesting to see exactly who's sticking around and why. But as long as they have a food source, that's why people often think that about the birds. They're not just going south for the winter. It's because their food source is gone. So the same with the monarchs. The food source is gone and they have to go away. But they are beautiful to look at, and we want to enjoy and help them with their plight, and provide the things that they need. So these are the things that they need. They need a habitat, meaning food, water, space, shelter. If we grow more flowers, period, that's the best thing I can tell you. Grow more flowers. Native plants are great because they provide a lot of nutrients and benefits for the plants. But if you don't have native plants, it's okay. The bugs, the bees, they'll come in, the butterflies will come anyway. If you can provide nesting sites for these insects, if you can limit your pesticide use in the garden, I know I try, with our bugs that are coming. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I've done the neem oil too. It's not really I don't find it so effective anyway, but we try to be right. Right, exactly. Yeah, oh yeah, I know because they're not out and about at that point. But so if you can limit your use of pesticides, sounds like you're doing that already, and eliminate invasive plants because invasive plants, even though they do provide some pollen or nectar, they kind of take over situations and then we don't get diverse communities of plants. So that's why we're saying with that one. And then don't be too tidy. So we're going to go over each one of these hit points in more detail as we go through the presentation. So hopefully it'll become a little clear to you. So habitat, the food, water, shelter space. We want to provide all these things for the insects and the birds and the bees. So a pond, a bird bath, a muddy puddle is even, you'll see a butterfly sometimes sipping from a muddy puddle. And the shelter and the space that they need to go up into the trees to take a rest. Sometimes I see the goldfinches now are sitting on the coneflowers eating the seed heads, but they want to go rest because it's amazing how they just balance there while they're eating. And then they got to fly to a bush or something to rest. So they're saying that, a shelter and space for all the creatures, whether it's the birds, the bees, the bugs, habitat is important, sort of like us. We need the same vital things: food, water, shelter, space. Plant native plants. There are about 1,800 native plants growing in Ohio. Not just flowers, but trees, shrubs, vines, perennials. In this picture, you got the purple coneflower. You've got the thin leaf coneflower and milkweed. Others could be monarda or butterfly weed, cardinal flower. These are all natives. And I have a resource page at the very end if you needed to take a screenshot of it so you don't have to worry about. But the Native Plant Society is a good one to go to find what is native. You enter your zip code in and they'll tell you exactly what's good for you in your area. And the native plants do provide a better job of giving what the insects need rather than some of the other plants that we're planting in our gardens. So we're all talking natives these days, but be aware that not all natives, just because they're natives doesn't mean they're deer resistant. Because a lot of people think, oh, they're natives, they should be deer. I have a big deer problem in my area. No, they'll eat. That's why we are not seeing trillium so much in our woods anymore. The deer browse those. So if just because it's native doesn't mean it's deer resistant. Some of the flowers for shady areas would be jack in the pulpits, the bloodroot, the species geranium at Cranesville, the purple one in the middle, and the columbine on the end. So just because if you have shade, you can still grow some flowers. And flowering plants are the most diverse group of all land plants. They have over 13,000 species, 13,000 genera and 300,000 species. So there's a lot of flowering plants. And there are about 1,800 native flowering plants that will grow in Ohio. So our zones have changed too. We've gotten warmer because every time there's a temperature difference of 5 degrees, they look at those charts and what if you were at 5A, you might be at 5B now. We even have a tropical zone in this southern tier of Ohio, very tip is 7. It's tropical. So yeah, it's our zones have changed just in the last year. So some characteristics of plants that are helpful for attracting pollinators. Color is important. They're like the hummingbirds are prone to go to reds or oranges. They'll go to other plants too, but they're drawn. Certain insects only see in they don't see like we see with the color. So fragrant plants are important. Nectar providing plants, host plants, which means that all parts of the plant is used by, the adult insect will lay eggs on the plant. Then the larva will come through from the eggs, and then once again they'll pupate and become another butterfly, sort of like we all know milkweed is the one for the monarch. But so host plants are important to have in your yard. We're saying easy to land on, meaning that it looks like a landing pad for the bugs. Where like I saw that little yellow goldfinch kind of hanging off the top of my coneflower. Something that is more wide, like the Joe Pye weed has more padded area, like when the flowers emerge. So it's easy for the bugs, the bees, and to land on them. So easy to get the nectar out of, and planting in clumps is good because there's more food in one close area. So if you think planting in 3s or 5s, or if you just have a big clump of something. And it's very important to scattered bloom times. So we want to try to provide something through the seasons, from spring, which is like everybody's out there planting, all the way fall. Now we're starting to see some of our fall flowers kicking in, and even in winter. Planting in clumps. We have the thin leaf coneflower, flax, the beer tongue. It just they can spend more energy feeding than flying. So it's just better off for the creatures that use these plants. Add host plants like the milkweed for the monarch butterfly. And even though the butterflies, they'll drink nectar from many types of flowers, this is their host plant for raising their young. Along with like the pearl, the New England asters, and black swallowtail caterpillars feed on plants in the carrot or the dill family. So I know at my community gardens, I grow dill for pickles. And my one neighbor last year came over, can I get some of your dill to take home? Because she wanted to have a source for the swallowtails. So there's a ODNR. You can go on their website. They have field guides for all these things, butterflies and skippers and all of these little creatures that live amongst us. So it's another good source of information. So where to plant? Well, most sun is the best. About 6 hours of sunlight is important to get the most bloom out of your plants. You want good drainage, like anything else in your garden. But you can plant in containers, beds, up a wall. So there shouldn't be anything that'll stop you from, planting flowers. Even when I had shade, I would put pots on my deck for flowers because I like flowers and I like to see. Usually the hummingbirds were coming to my canna lilies, but like I said, after the storm, I haven't seen the hummingbirds. So because they're right outside my door, they come real close. My granddaughter was here from Texas around the 4th of July, and she goes, look at Grandma, you got a hummingbird, because you can see them really close if you have plants up close. The next thing on our hit list is to provide bloom through the seasons. Different insects and creatures are active in Ohio at different times of the year. The queen bumblebees, the morning cloak butterflies, they're active in early spring. But the monarch butterflies are still active now going into fall. So we want to make sure that we have something for them throughout the season, something that they can use to nurture themselves. So if you plant flowers, these are the more winter ones we're talking about. Shrubs and vines with berries, wild grape, hawthorn, which are beautiful in the winter. You can almost use them like holly berries. Winter berries and viburnums have a lot of berries on them. Now, those will attract the birds throughout the wintertime, the birds that stay here. And in the spring, we want other things. We need the maples, we need the willows, we need the red buds, because those things are blooming out in the spring. So that's what I'm talking about, having bloom throughout the seasons so that you can get your pollinators there at any time. Provide nesting sites. That doesn't mean you have to go out and build a nest, but the birds always nest in my hemlock trees. There's little crooks in the trees, so it's a perfect landing pad, and they're always building nests there. The bees will nest in the ground. They're solitary bees. People don't realize that they nest in cavities in the ground. They'll nest in cavities in a tree. They don't necessarily need a nesting box, or most of our bees in Ohio are solitary bees, and greater than 70% of them nest in the ground. Yeah, greater than 70%. They, no, well, sometimes if they're only bad if they're in the wrong place. I've had that occur to me when my grandson was little, maybe two, and we walked off the deck one day, and I thought I saw a couple bees, and then they went home, and the very next day after they left town, I got these bees. I didn't know they were like as bad as they were, but they kind of attacked me. And I had like capri pants on, and they kind of got up my pant leg, and come running in the house. My husband wasn't home; I was by myself. And yeah, the bees were, because you kind of got in their space. We knew where they were now, and we could take care of them. And you don't want them to be in your space, so to speak. Like if they're, oh yeah, yeah, they can be in a raised bed. This year, there's a lot of, we have a hornet's nest, we have, it's things like that. So you're seeing, I think the warmer temperatures, we're seeing obviously more insects. Yellow jackets are coming. If you have them already, oh, really? They probably are. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, these are the things we don't really have to think about providing nesting sites, although some people do put up the bee boxes now, and that provides sites for like the mason bee, typically the ones that are out in the spring, and they're looking for spring blooming things to use for their food source. But so these things, it's not like I have to put out a box, or because the insects are going to come anyway, and the birds will come anyway, whether you have a tree. I always think about, why are these birds building it? Because it's by my front porch, and there's always stray cats. I don't have a cat, but people leave cats, and there's feral cats roaming around, and these poor birds are right there, thinking they're in a protected spot, but I've seen the cats pounce on them. So, or the eagles, hawks, other things are up there looking for birds too. So, um, limiting pesticides is important. They have negative effects on the bees and the other insects that pollinate our yards. If so, I always tell people, use an integrated pest management scheme. Go out, look in your yard, visit at different times. What's eating? You have holes. What have you seen anything? The Japanese beetles were terrible this year. A lot of holes on plants, and they'll strip the leaves, by eating. But if you can, pesticides will kill all pests. So herbicides kill plants, insecticides kill insects. So with that, because I have Roundup here, I felt compelled to tell you that Roundup is still on the market. When I started this talk, it was supposed to come off the market a couple years back, and now there's still litigation pending right now. Maybe later in August we'll know more, but the EPA, it's I always want to say this wrong, glyphosate, correct me, glyphosate, that's the agent that harms people. It is a cancer killing, agent in this Roundup. That's why it's been pulled off the market everywhere else, but no, you can still buy it. Yeah. Well, see, we're not the big culprit. It's the farm industry that uses this to contain. Yeah, yeah, So it's in the grain. It's a carcinogen. The WHO, the World Health Organization, they've labeled it a carcinogen, and they don't recommend you using it. But the EPA here in our country says, oh, it's not harmful to humans. So it's in litigation now. You can still buy it, but once something happens, which it could be happening very soon with them. They are said by 2026, but it could be even faster, because I know they have proven that it does cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And people are now, like, if you know somebody that has that, you're supposed to write into, because there's litigation pending, and they want as many people as possible. But once it comes off, There's nothing else that can replace it. You know, vinegar, water, salt. I mean, those are the baking soda. So, you know, because Roundup, you think about, yeah, boiling water with vinegar, salt, you know, et cetera, baking soda in there. There's not really a substitute in the market. So it's like the home, we're going back to our home recipes basically, because that kills everything. I mean, if you had, although I still have a little bit of it, and I saw it when I was, you know, cleaning up tornado debris yesterday or the day before. I saw a couple little hits of poison ivy in my yard, and I don't have a brush killer. You have to usually buy something that says for poison ivy or brush killer. If it's not listed on the bottle, it's probably not going to take care of it. I don't know if Roundup will take it. It's only the only thing I had. I just sprayed the little because we were working back there and I didn't want us to just step in there. So anyway, if you can limit pesticides, it's great. Sounds like you're already, my audience is already doing that. So if we can eliminate invasive plants, and in this picture, starting on the left, we got the Amur honeysuckle. We have lesser celandine, which looks a lot like the marsh marigold, but it doesn't grow near water. It grows anywhere. And when you see it in parks, and my neighbor has it all in her backyard, you'll get it in your yard. Garlic mustard is the third one. Yeah, it's bad. And people, and then the last one is the calorie pear, which has been banned. You cannot buy calorie pears anymore in Ohio because if you go down to like the Columbus or mid-Ohio area, they just have become invasive. I mean, they planted one and then the seeds are here and there. So that's the thing about invasives. A lot of these plants were brought here, either for beauty or for whatever reason, but then because of the environment that they were growing in was unlike maybe where the garlic mustard came out of Europe. Yeah, but it's really invaded our spaces and it's created a lot of other plants cannot live there because the garlic mustard's taking over, or the honeysuckle, or even I can't remember. There's a shrub that I always go, oh my gosh, it's all over the parks and stuff. But I can't remember the name of it right now. But anyway, so if you can try to eliminate invasives in your little part of the yard, if you're not spraying Roundup on them, maybe you're going to put your vinegar on them or something. Yeah. So that will help the pollinators. They will go to these plants, but these plants will take over. And so we're trying to keep the landscape as diverse because it just supports more populations of insects and, you know, birds, bees, etc. Then some of these plants are very specific and only certain bugs and insects will go to them. Another thing is this, I like this one. Don't be too tidy. Leave the leaves in the fall. Don't be in a rush to clean it all up because a lot of the creatures that live here, the little micro bugs and things, they live in the leaf litter all winter long. So, you know, if you're raking it up, it's good. If you want to clean up your yard, it's okay. Or maybe rake it to a pile but don't ever just blow it off because you're just, besides the leaves are good. They're good composted material over time. But if you're shredding them, yeah, shredding them is not so good for yeah, you're shredding the insects. No, but that's the problem. That's why they tell people to not shred their leaves. So if you have an area like I do, a natural area that I just blow my leaves all back to this area and let them go. And I've never been too tiny of a gardener, to be honest with you. But they're even going so far as to save the stems too, because the smallest creatures sometimes are overwintering in your perennial stems. So, yeah. Oh, no, that's okay. You're okay. No, it's probably a good thing you don't cut it. I mean, and then you can wait until May. Or sometimes they just fall apart, you know, like they'll come down on their own. So that's a good thing because a lot of these insects are there using the leaf litter and also the stems to house themselves in over the winter. And since we provided all that good stuff, they will come. And you don't know who else is going to come. Like this toad, or I have toads in my garden too. I mean, it's good. They eat a lot of insects. You know, it's a natural cycle of life, I guess. But So we're going to take a look now at all of the insects and creatures that we might see in our yard now that we've created good spaces and get to know them a little bit better. Maybe I'd be able to identify them. So butterflies, they do come in many shapes and sizes. They do have 2 pair of wings with scales on them. And they have 3 pairs, so true insect, 6 legs. The antenna help them navigate, and most of them fly between 5 to 10 miles an hour. So that's just a little fun fact there. The butterfly wings can be used for camouflage, which you think about the monarch, you're like, how is that camouflage? But a lot of times other insects and birds know that these if a bird bites a monarch, it's poisonous to the bird. So that color kind of alerts birds that I can't eat this insect. So that's why we're talking about camouflage a little bit, even on the monarch butterfly. Other times they'll blend into the leaf or to the branches that they're going to, or the food sources that they're eating from. They also regulate their body temperature through their wings, attract mates, and like I said, it's a warning for those birds that might be choosing to try to go after a monarch. That is not a good taste. Mom bird already told me, don't eat the monarchs, that kind of thing. Some of the butterfly types are skippers on the left. They have the hooked antenna. They don't usually, they're not colorful, and but they are very fast flyers. They can fly up to almost 40 miles an hour, the little skippers, yeah. The American painted lady is got the true knobbed antenna on the end, and the painted lady can be found on every continent around the world except for Australia and Antarctica. So these just a little fact, because sometimes it's interesting, like, wow, I didn't know that. And the adult painted lady can fly, lives for about 6 to 20 days. That's the thing about butterflies, they don't have a long life. So short life, those that migrate, you might get 2nd or 3rd generations with migration. So they're having, nesting sites along the way. So it's not necessarily the same butterflies because they live a very short life. More common butterflies are the clouded sulfur. The clouded sulfur is one of the only butterflies that most butterflies will have their wings out when they're taking nectar or eating pollen, but the clouded sulfur always holds its wings up. It's one way to identify it. And the eastern tiger swallowtail has the pointed ends on its tail, and it is the most common swallowtail in Ohio. But it's very beautiful. I love to see the swallowtails. They have the black swallowtails. This is the eastern tiger swallowtail. We all know the cabbage white, because if you have brassica plants, kale, cabbage, broccoli, you're going to probably see them, because the butterfly doesn't really do any harm to the plant. It's laying those eggs, like you were saying, on your cucumber or whatever. And that's probably that whole squash beetle thing. That's a whole different creature, but same thing. So the eggs laid on there turn into nymphs. The nymphs eat like crazy to grow and get the strength they need to turn into the butterfly or the bug that they become. So the cabbage white is just something we have to deal with. And they do say, if you want to, if you're planting all these things, plant herbs nearby, because most cabbage whites do not like the smell of these herbs. So if you can, chives or lavender or any of the stronger smelling mints, things like that. Yeah, sometimes they do, and so they'll go somewhere else, maybe to your neighbor's garden who doesn't have, those things planted. We're okay with that, yeah. This is the spice bush swallowtail, and that is the larva. It's kind of funny looking. It actually does remind you of a little snake, but it's camouflage. It's intended to be that way, so they blend into the plants that they're on. And they like to, you might find them on sweet bay or sassafras or even tulip trees, but they're blending in. That's their camouflage. And also, it looks like eyes. These are not its eyes. It's just, it kind of tricks birds and things into grabbing this spot instead of the back spot, because it's more vulnerable, where the eyes really are. So, and they're in a larva stage for like 3 to 4 weeks. and only 6 to 14 days as an adult. So it's fun, kind of fun. So I have sometimes seen these, and like when you find a leaf that's kind of folded over, it looks like a sleeping bag. It's usually one of these guys inside of it. So yeah, they kind of protect themselves that way from predators. So they are very birds, bees, but they're all very kind of interesting. And there's our monarch. Um, so the fun fact I have here is that the monarchs are signaled by the dieback of the plants to begin migration. It's not the weather, it's the plant. It's their food. It's always food related, that these insects start going south. My daughter lives in Houston, so we see the monarchs there very early in the spring. I've been there in April, and there's monarchs there already, but it takes them a while to get up here. Our food sources are growing, as we go further north later on. They travel about 2,000 miles during migration, and they might overwinter on trees at various stages. The last time I saw a monarch last year was October 12th. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? So they're both you never know, but that seemed like kind of late. Like I said, are you going to make it down to Mexico? Because but I think that they're going to be okay. The planet is warming, and they kind of know more than we do, I believe. So that's our butterflies. So we're going to go to our honeybees. The best way to identify is by their color, shape, size. And we do have about 4,000 species of bees in the U.S. And half of them are solitary, means they're not going into your beehives or, a colony of bees. They are living by themselves in those cracks and crevices, in your stems, in your leaves. So, and they do a good job of pollinating our plants. They are not native here. They were brought over from Europe in the 17th century, but now they aid in our pollination so much that we just are happy to have them. We're not going to say we're invasive or you're not native, blah, blah, blah. They've been here for a long time. And the colony collapse disorder that we heard about, probably not so much in the last couple of years, but maybe 5 years ago, was when the hive would get contaminated and all the workers would leave. And so the queen then is left there, and she needs them all to provide the nectar for her to lay more eggs to have the colony go on. So they don't know if that was because of the climate, disease. They're not really sure, but pesticides, there's a lot of things that could enter into that. But they have antenna wings and 6 legs, and they can fly up to 15 miles an hour. I thought this was interesting. A honeybee worker only makes an average of 1/12 of a teaspoon in her lifetime. And the honeybee workers are all females. And if 1 ounce of honey would fuel a bee's flight around the world. A pound of honey is made by 2 million visits to flowers. It's amazing when you think about how busy they are and how much it takes to get that jar of honey. Yeah. And you can see why it's expensive. Like if you buy the really good, yeah, it really does. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So that's our honey bees. These are our bumblebees. Most people do recognize bumblebees, but there are about 10 species found in Ohio. And I can't identify them all, but there are a few things to look for with the bumblebees. They are obviously fuzzy compared to the honeybees, and hairy. They're usually docile. They don't really want to sting. They have thick bodies and dark wings. And they are least likely to sting but if they do sting, because once a regular honeybee stings, it dies because the barbs on its tail pull out and rips the abdomen, so the bee is dead. But the bumblebee doesn't have that, and so she can sting multiple times. So if you start, if something's at you and it's a bumblebee, you just want to be careful. A little bit of difference between the honeybee on the left and the bumblebee. They're thinner. The honeybee has 4 wings. The bumblebees have thicker bodies and 2 wings. So it's pretty obvious the difference, but I have another slide here to show you. If you're comparing the honeybee these are kind of pictographs that kind of make it a little clearer, because seeing the real picture is one thing, but seeing a mock-up of what they look like sometimes helps a lot more. So the honeybee is on the left, the bumblebee's in the middle, and the wasp is on the end. And that wasp is one that will fly erratically. They're looking for insects. So they'll fly high, they'll fly low, whereas the honeybee and the bumblebee are looking for nectar or pollen. So they are more erratic in their flight patterns, and so they're slim-bodied. You don't want to get in their way, because it does, these stings do hurt, whether it's either one of these insects. This is another bumblebee, the Adrena mining bee. They're known as chimney bees. They're smaller than a regular bumble, so they're very important to flower pollination. They're solitary ground nesting bees. They like to establish their homes in well-drained soils or in trees around the area. I just have a couple of pictures of other things, like this guy you probably know. This is Xylocopa, a large carpenter bee. So if you have problems, or if you have a lot of wood that is rotting on a wood pile, you might, or on a house, because that's where you might get in trouble with these carpenter bees. You don't want to get stung by them. They do have the most painful sting of all of the bees. So, yeah, time to call the exterminator, I guess, when you see those bees. And there's your mason bee. This is what you're attracting in the spring with your bug bee houses. They are very good pollinators. They almost do a better job than the honeybees. I have to tell you this. There was a show I saw about on PBS. It was called Growing a Greener World, and I have the episode and everything, but they were actually using these mason bees to pollinate fields in California, but very effectively. Because I believe the honeybee has to step on, but this mason bee, and get the pollen from the legs, but the mason bee will get it all like in the abdomen. So they're picking up more pollen per visit than the honeybees. So they have baskets on their legs. They're collecting the pollen basically. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but these are the early ones in the spring that you'll see flying around. They can sting, but they're very docile. They don't really sting. I mean, I haven't seen too much about stings from the mason bees, and they're the earliest ones we're going to see here. So like when your trees are starting to bud, your maples are budding, they're if you have those kind of things, that's what they're going to be drawn to for their pollen. They're very small bees too. Now we're going to go into the birds. The birds are in decline. Three main factors that puts the birds in decline are agriculture, cutting down a forest, which we've done, but it's not even just us. It's around the world. Forests are being cut down. Invasive species and climate change are all contributing to the birds are in decline. It's kind of amazing when I see the numbers, though, when you think about when these institutions throw out these numbers, you're like, wow. And I saw something about a special where, the lights on, a lot of big cities are turning out the lights because the birds are flying into their high-rise buildings, and especially during migration, and they're going through pathways. But in 1 year, 600 million birds were killed in Chicago, Houston, and Dallas and they actually have to have people come and clean like overnight because there's so many birds at the bases of these high rises. So it's during migration that a lot of this happens, and it's kind of sad. But these are the things that affect them: is the unusual weather, and we hope we can do a little bit better job to help them. But they've been in a decline. Here's some simple actions that we can do to help the birds is reduce plastic use, because everybody knows plastics are bad, and they're always littering the side of the road too. Do citizen science. Sometimes they have groups of people. Sometimes citizen science is as easy as if you have your phone, you could do the iPhone. You've got eNature, I think it's called. It's an app that you can just, if you see things, something unusual, you just take a picture of it and you send it in. So that's part of citizen science. They're talking about drinking shade-grown coffee because they're not cutting down the canopy. The birds still have places to go when they are going south. Like I said, some of this is not in our control, but we can't keep our cats indoors if you have a cat, or or you can use native plants and you can avoid pesticides. So all these things do help, steps to keep the birds around us. This was kind of a neat little, this was from Audubon, I believe. Yes, Audubon. Things that you can do gardening for birds. Keep the cats indoors, avoid herbicides and pesticides, choose some natives, put up some boxes or feeders or water sources, brush piles that they can use for nesting or nesting sites, or finding things that they can use to build a nest in the brush. So we can, it's not out of our control. We do have some control. We're going to talk about some of the birds we see at our feeders. We're going to start with the ruby-throated hummingbirds. They are native. They migrate to Mexico and Argentina, and they are attracted to nectar of the flowers. The tubular shape of the flowers is what they're going after, because not a lot of other birds will be able to get into that tubular shape. Their wing flaps go from 40 to 70 times a second. Their nests are like walnut size. We saw one in the wild when I worked with the park district, and they were little, very little, and their eggs look like little M&Ms. It's as small as eggs. So if you're putting out feeders, which I don't, because I try to provide nectar plants for the, because I'm not so good with, 4 parts of water to 1 part of sugar, keeping it clean, blah, blah, blah. So, or you can just forget the whole feeder thing and just put out some nectar-rich plants. This was another one, PBS. PBS does have a lot of very interesting things. They have a show called Nature, which they have a lot of various topics, but this was called The Hummingbird Effect, and it talked about the symbiotic relationship between some of these hummingbirds have beaks that go down, and so they're going into a certain kind of plant and the plants have evolved for the hummingbird. It's very interesting it's like to really think about that. But in the fall, we could maybe try to keep them here with fuchsias or Mona lavenders, coral bells. These are some of the things they do. The cannas or the calla, honeysuckle, the native honeysuckle. So that's our hummingbird. We'd love to see the hummingbirds. I know everybody, like I said, wants to see them and looking for the first count. I think the earliest I've ever seen them was on Mother's Day one year, was just like early May or like 10th or something. But these are also some fun feeder birds that you might see. Is a black-capped chickadee. He says his name, chickadee, dee, dee, chickadee. That's what he does. You'll know him by that sound, or if you don't see him, you'll hear him. The black junco up on top, he migrates here for the winter because he's coming out of Canada. So it's one bird that you won't see here year-round, but you'll see him all winter. And then when it starts getting warmer, because it's all migration is all about where the food is. So for insects and birds. So his food up in Canada is scarce, so he's coming to Ohio and points south to eat. And then the tufted titmouse, which is a cousin to black-capped chickadee, believe it or not, but they're related. And the dark-eyed junco actually hops on the ground. You'll see his bright white belly and his grayish blue purple color, but he hops on the ground instead of he can hop about a foot on the ground. It's kind of, when you see them, they're like, wow. But they usually do come in you'll see more than one at a time. So it's always fun when you count things at feeder, when you go to a feeder watch or you're participating in those things. They want to see how many do you get at one time? 5, 6, 7, can you top that? But that's some of the fun things that to watch. It's fun to I love to put the feeders out in the winter. It keeps my garden alive and living. That's how I feel when I see the birds. These are the woodpeckers. The downy on the left is the smallest. It's hard to tell the downy from the hairy, which is the guy next to him, unless they're together. It's really hard to tell. The downy has a black a stripe down the middle, and the hairy you can see has like little white, more white down the middle of his back. Um, they both have red spots on their head. The Downy's beak is kind of like thinner, like a kind of like a warbler's beak, kind of needle thin, where the hairy obviously has a little bit bigger, stronger looking beak. And then we have this guy on the bottom right. He's called a red-bellied woodpecker, but he's not a red. He doesn't have any red on his belly, but that's what he's known as, a red-bellied woodpecker. And then we have the pileated or pileated woodpecker on the left. He's the biggest woodpecker we've got around here. We also have yellow-bellied sapsuckers that are part of the woodpecker family, and you'll see them a lot in the spring. These guys are digging holes, larvae in your tree, trying to get the larvae out of your tree. Sometimes you'll see, they'll kind of go up the tree, and they do go up the tree. They actually will just hop up the tree. So it's a fun bird to watch. On this page, I've got the brown-headed cowbird, the passenger pigeon. What am I calling her? The passenger pigeon? She's not. She's a mourning dove. I'm sorry. That's another program, passenger pigeons. They're extinct. The mourning dove. We have the wren on the left over there, and then we have the nuthatch over here. So the little wren is one that you'll know they like to build their nest close to houses or in your garden flowers or shrubs, and they'll be, you come near, they're like get away, and they're just telling you that they have something going on there, but you'll see them, and their tail is usually up like that. That's how you can kind of tell that what this is, the house wren. The cowbird on top is kind of a meanie because he kind of will invade other birds' nests and take them over as his own. So they'll use that. Yeah, they're using that for nesting sites, and then the other birds can't. Those other eggs that were laid there are gonna not make it. So they're opportunistic, I guess you could say. The mourning dove, they have that coo 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 sound, and this little nuthatch here, the woodpecker climbs up the trees. This guy goes down the trees, head first. So if you see a bird, a nuthatch, they're white-breasted. There's various nuthatches, but this is just the wrens are really little. The nuthatches are a little bit bigger than that, and they're kind of bluish gray on the back. But you'll see him going. If you see a bird going down the tree, it's him. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. So those are some of the birds that you might see at your feeder. Let's see if we got a couple more. We have, once again, the ruby-throated hummingbird, the the red-winged blackbird, I'm sorry, the bluebird, eastern bluebird, and then our goldfinches. And like we said, sometimes things change. The hummingbird comes up, different times they migrate, of course. The red-winged blackbird also migrates. So it's always a first sign of spring. When you're seeing them in your yards or close by, it's like, ooh, it's spring's, because there's bugs here. So they're coming to eat the bugs that they dine on. The bluebird is a whole different story because they used to migrate pretty hard out of here. But as our winters have gotten warmer, they've been around for the last 2 or 3 years. You'll see bluebirds all winter now. If you put a feeder up, you're going to see bluebirds this winter. And then the goldfinches, they stick around, but their color changes. If you notice, they get golder as it gets warmer. So when they start getting really gold, it's like, ooh, it's summer, summer's coming, Of course, the females are more muted color than the males, but it's just kind of a fun thing to see all these birds. Well, we can't get through a bird program without the crow, the grackles, or the starlings. And the crow is on the left. The starling is next to him, and the grackle's on the ground. Crows are very smart birds. I have in the next slide, I have a little bit, we'll talk more about the crows. The grackles are on the ground. As you see the picture, he's on the ground. They will be attracted to your lawn and garden. They usually come, a lot of them at the same time, so you hear this whole influx of birds coming. And then the starling is not native here and has become a problem here. So it's the only bird that can be targeted. Most birds are protected by federal laws. You can't collect feathers, etc. But in many parts of the country you can, and people do take care of the starlings because they will travel in large groups and they will really do a number on farmers' fields. So where agriculture is really a big business, they don't want this bird around. And they've been here since the 1890s when they were imported here because they wanted to have all the birds that were in Central Park from, I'm trying to think, I've lost my train of thought, Shakespeare's writings. So that's why, that's why he's European. Yeah, he's European. Yeah, so he's here now to stay and become quite a problem. But you might see him, and you will see all these birds at your feeder. I just want to point out some of the obvious ones. The crows, fun facts, is they do live in a group called a murder. Yeah. Of all the bird species, crows have the largest brain to body ratio. They're very smart. I know I worked at Lake Metro Parks. They actually have a crow that they take to programs because they teach them to do tricks. They're very smart. Yes. Yes, they're very smart. So don't, and they're the ones that use a tool. They know how to use tools to break open some of the seeds and things. And they look after the nest. They'll like parents, yeah, where taking care of like the next batch of chicks. They might stay around even though they're a teenage bird. They could go do their own thing, but they're kind of staying around to help. So they just are amazing, and they have their own dialect, and they can change the dialect deliberately and at will. If if there's other birds or something's picking up, they can change their dialect. So yes, they do. Yeah, yeah. They're very smart birds. And yeah. Oh, outside. Yeah. Oh, coming back, looking for. Oh, how funny. Ah, there you go. He's trained. He's kind of trained himself. They are smart, very smart birds. So when you see them, sometimes people go, "What is that bird?" And why, but it's a crow, and they, not to be discounted. They are very intelligent birds. So before we hang it up for the day, a few departing thoughts here. 96% of terrestrial birds rear their young on insects and caterpillars as a particularly important food source. And during the breeding season, Carolina chickadees need a lot of insects. In the case of chickadees, more than 5,000 per clutch, which is like if you get 6 eggs, 5,000. And then more than 90% of the moth and butterfly caterpillars eat only particular plants or native plants. Chickadees prefer to forage on native trees. Native trees do support more of the caterpillars that birds need. That's the things we don't think about. They're feeding their young caterpillars like crazy when they're fledglings before they leave the nest. And that all these creatures, along with moths, bats, pollinate over 75% of our plants in the world. The number one thing, there's a whole thing about like what's the best plant you could plant. It's basically the oak tree, because the oak tree supports 575 different species of caterpillars, which is where our birds are getting their. So if you have oaks, I didn't lose my big oak during the last 2 tornadoes, the last 2 years. So it's still there supporting the birds in my neighborhood, in my yard. But it's just kind of amazing that one tree can, yeah. Oh, they sometimes the nutrients, sometimes I've seen squirrels strip bark. Yeah. Yes, they can. And the oaks are, that's how I feel about my oak. I'm glad. I'm like worried that it's like only 3 standing. So yeah, right. But my next and last slide is just a screenshot, basically. If you'd like any of those resources that some of this information was pulled from, or if you, like I said, if you want to go online and look for your own sources, but always just go with .org or .edu is at the end, 3 initials. It's just good information, science-based information. as opposed to commercial information. I'm not saying that commercial sites are bad, but sometimes they just want to lead you down a path to like, oh, there's like 25,000 different daylilies, and there are probably, but we're not really here for that. So, but anyway, that's the program today. I'm glad we got a couple people here. And I know we probably don't have any questions, we've been talking, but if there's anything you think about.